Welcome to another episode of the Neoliberal podcast. I'm Renaldo McKenzie, and with me is Dante Nelson. The title of this podcast episode is entitled "China Taxed is a Poor People's Tax." What of economies of scale? Again, China is taxed. Means then that poor people are taxed. Then what of economies of scale? What am I getting at? Quite deep. If you're an economist or ever study economics and understand the idea of economies of scale, then you'll know what I'm getting at. Again, China, the China tax, the China tariff, the tariff that Trump placed on China is tantamount to a tax on poor people. And also, it begs the question, what of economies of scale? I discuss right now.
I think China is actually falling behind in this game of chicken, right? They're the only one not at the table right now because of the way they retaliated. In addition, they're a surplus nation. So they export to us about 5 times as much as we export to them. We are the consumer. We are the largest economy in the world. We hold the cards here. And if they don't come to the table at some point and get to a place where the trade deficit, and I'll use the term and the thought of trade deficit, not tariff, because that's what this is really about. We need to even out and start to reduce our deficit numbers for many reasons. But if they don't come to the table and start to negotiate, they're going to be the ones hurt more than us. So I do believe 100% there is downside risk to the China conversation. I also believe that we hold the cards here and that China will come to the table and that we will get to a better resolution, and our deficit with China, our trade deficit, will start to drop, which will help us on every level. Manufacturing at home, it will help us with the dollar being slushed around the globe to fill these trade deficit numbers. That'll create a stronger dollar. It'll reduce pressure, inflationary pressures. There's a lot of reasons why we want this. There's a lot of reasons why China needs this.
That was Tony Esposito, Island Capital Investments. What he has not said in terms of the downside of these investments, of the tariffs on China, is that many of the small communities, and if you listen to the trade secretary earlier, alluded to the cheap goods from China. The thing is, and I'm going to call them less expensive good or economically affordable goods. Many of these goods go into the low-income communities, black and brown communities, minority communities, many of the mama and papa shops, the corner stores, the Chinese stores, many of the small, low-income communities, people who benefit from welfare government programs, or even who benefit, who work under the table, participate in informal economy. They purchased second-hand vehicles or cheaply made goods from the U.S. From China, goods that come from China. So there's a large community in the U.S. that cannot afford to purchase American-made goods, okay? And so, but what has happened over the years, they have been able to experience, okay, the same kind of comfort and achieve the level of satisfaction and life that other people, the 1% and the 3%, other people who can, and other Americans who live in the suburbs and wealthier neighborhoods, who go to what's the expensive store, who can shop at Acme, and what's Acme and or Kia or IKEA or those ShopRite. I don't, yeah, sure. But and then they can afford to purchase those goods. You don't find a ShopRite or an Acme in certain communities, in certain neighborhoods, okay? Because the people in those neighborhoods cannot afford to purchase those goods. So a lot of the goods, a lot of the products that come into the US from China, okay, that are economical, that are affordable, a lot of them find their way in communities like small minority communities or black and brown communities or or communities where the wages, where they have low wages in that community, in those communities, okay, and so they cannot afford to purchase. So, and it's also part of economies of scale. What China's goods, China's services, what that is, that they provide a kind of, they're part of the economies of scaling in society, the scaling of the economy. So where US and European goods, they cater to a certain market, to a certain clientele, to certain customers. China now, they produce goods that cater to a certain clientele, achieving economies of scale. That's one. That's one thing people are not saying. What is economies of scale? Say, for example, you go to a ball game. You have the bleacher, they charge $10, and then you have the upstairs under the roof, they charge you $50, and then you go and so on. They have because they want it affordability. They want access. They want everybody to be able to come to the game and watch it. So they're not going to charge $5,000 ticket, okay? No, they're going to charge. They have $5,000, $3,000, $200, $50 ticket. Okay, they charge. They do it like that. It's called economies of scale. So that different people can access the same good at certain level. But whatever, depending on what you pay, you get certain comfort, but you still get to watch the game. China. Okay, so now China provides the good or the services, whatever it is, a little bit less, cheaply made, or not as but not as well made, not of high quality. That's what people. That's the idea, yes, and that is true. A lot of goods in China can copy anything, okay, but they provide to a particular clientele. They provide a market audience because of economies of scale. No one is having that conversation. What's going to happen to communities? Fine, the other countries have come to the table. They decide to charge. They decide. Donald Trump decides a 90-day reprieve. They still have not. Okay, but however, except for China or countries that charge reciprocal taxes. Fine, I agree that China. The U.S. has a trade deficit with China. In other words, more goods come in from China to the US than what leave from the US to China. So yes, so we are shelling out more money to China per year than what we are getting from China. So fine, you charge them a tariff. So I agree with that. I agree with charging China a tariff. However, the problem with that tariff is that, remember that China helps to fill a vacuum. China helps to provide goods and services to your people, to your population in communities, okay, that can afford to purchase these goods, unless you get them from other parts of the world, and other parts of the world cannot make the goods and sell them at a rate that China can, okay? So no one is talking about that, but we here at the Neoliberal, we are talking about it. We are having that conversation today. We will have the conversation today. The idea of economies of scale. What of economies of scale? If you slap a 125% tariff on China because China decides to retaliate. Yes, China decides to retaliate to charge that, but I disagree. China should not retaliate by charging it. What they should have done, they should have come to the table and said, fine, we understand there's a trade deficit.
Really though?
So probably we should, let's negotiate. No, yeah, that's true. China, more goods coming to the US than goods go to China. But first of all, Chinese people can't afford US goods. If some of the Nikes and the J. Crew and what the other ones called, these expensive goods and stores and stuff, you want to sell these Apple products, you want to send them to China? We're already sending goods to China for them to make it, so we could pay them $1 per day. Okay, so how this is what I'm talking about. You have to put things into perspective, people. Are you guys listening to me? You guys in the world, are you listening to me? One, you have to think about economies of scale. If you decide to raise the price of China, it means then that it's going to affect the stores in the communities, the local minority, black and brown communities. Because a lot of them get goods from China and provide the family dollars. Where do you think the family dollars in the Dollar Tree? Where do you think they get the goods from? Huh? The family dollars and the Dollar Trees and so on. Unless we're going to now move away from China and get the same goods at the same value from other way else and charge them that 125% tariff. But the thing is, it is unfair for the US to charge China 125% tariff. Okay, the thing is,
now this is what I want to.
Why
is it unfair?
It is unfair because currently, China goods and their products and so on. China send goods. A lot of their goods and their services help to fill a need. Yes.
Yes.
It helps to fill a need. They sell goods at half the price that you get that anybody else would. Half the price. They make a hanger, you sell it for 50 cents. Another company in the US make it at $2.50. Okay? They're charging, and they sell high end. A lot of their goods are high end. That's the next thing, high end. So China can afford to cheaply make goods and pay their people 50 cents and send it to the US in mass. Okay? So fine, if you're going to charge $125 tariff on China, then what China could do is that instead of mass producing goods that are cheaply made unless they will now stop making these goods and now start targeting higher end clientele. But who's going to serve the local communities in Philadelphia, Delaware, the mama papa stores, the dollar stores, the corner shops? Where are they going to get the goods and services?
And thank you for pointing.
Where are they going to get that?
Because that's always the problem. They always forget about
the local communities. They already lack investments, and they lack a kind of high-end stores and shops and so on. More often than not, you have to go outside of the community, to the suburbs and so on, to purchase or to access certain goods or services. Yes? So now, if the American stores aren't in the hoods of America, yes? And the stores here that are here are able to operate here because they buy the goods from China because it's cheap, and they can afford to sell the buns and so on cheaper than what other stores sell it because they get it from China. What's going to happen when they now can't afford, because now they have to pay, now they're going to be operating in the hoods selling buns the same way ShopRite sell it? Excuse me, they're going to run out of business. And then poor people going to starve, or what's going to happen? You're going to have relative deprivation, because now you're going to have high levels of crime and violence and theft. That's what people are not talking in those ways. Yes? The next thing is I want to make a point about reciprocal. I want to make a point about reciprocal taxes. Reciprocal taxes. Who are the countries that Donald Trump or the U.S. charge reciprocal taxes on? The countries that the U.S. have a beneficial balance of trade agreement. In other words, in fact, if anything, all of the Caribbean countries are flooded with American goods and services. And America they have, like, say for example, Jamaica and Barbados, there's a trade deficit. All these countries have a trade deficit with the U.S. More goods go into the Caribbean than what is allowed to come into the U.S. So there is a trade. So he charged a 10% reciprocal tariff on them, saying that they can charge a tariff, charge tariffs on U.S. imports, although the U.S. have an unfair trade agreement that benefit the U.S. over the Caribbean, and the Caribbean have been suffering or have to be there's a deficit right there. The Caribbean experience a deficit. So those are the countries that the U.S. charges 10%. So fine, the U.S. okay, we're not going to charge you guys because we're already doing well in your countries. Okay, we're already doing well in your countries. However, you can't charge us any tariff. If you charge us, we're going to apply 10%. That's reciprocal. You understand? Let's put it into perspective. Yes? Put it into perspective. Now, those countries that the U.S. charge 65%, 100%, like, and so on, those countries are more goods. It means more goods coming to the U.S. from those places than that going to or there's a trade deficit, or the U.S. don't benefit as much as the other country. So the U.S. slap. And yes, I agree with that. Slap them. Slap the UK, slap Canada, slap EU, slap China. However, you have to be careful in terms of how you slap China, because China also provide a service to your people in the hoods, in low income, in the minority communities, in the family dollar, in Republican neighborhoods. Yes, in even the Republican cities, the Dollar Tree and the Aldis. Yes, not just in the hoods. But where you have low-income white people in some places, yes, like the Aldis, they go to Aldi. Yeah, they don't go to Aldi. Yeah, they go to Aldi. That's where a lot of the Chinese could end up there too. So let's talk about that. Nobody's talking about it like we are. The Neoliberal Round Podcast at the Neoliberal Corporation. Visit us on any stream, okay? And we're also on YouTube at Renaldo McKenzie. And visit our website, neoliberal.com, renaldocmckenzie.com. Access any of our articles, and also visit our store page, andsbusinesssolutions.com. Or, of course, there's also store.theneoliberal.com. Get copies of our books and look and see what we're about. This is the Neoliberal Round Podcast. I'm Renaldo McKenzie, and with me is
Dante Nelson.
What good?
Dante Nelson.
Dante Nelson. He wants to update that. We put that in the bloopers. And of course, tomorrow we will speak with Claudio Bono. That one is going to be in video. We did a little blooper thing on him, and of course he chided me about recording him without his knowledge and publishing. But he laughed about it and said it's genuine. But I told him spontaneity is always better than live. Okay, and we laughed about it. The Neoliberal Round Podcast. So tomorrow we continue. We talk some more with Claudio Bono. Claudio Bono will talk about solutions to ending homelessness, and then we will talk with, and then of course on Friday the Caribbean Thought Lecture Series. We're going to wrap up the final class looking at 2 other islands, including Suriname, and we'll talk about what's going on in Dominican Republic. We did talk about Dominica and Haiti recently, and here we have this catastrophe in terms of the the collapse of the roof. This is the Neoliberal Podcast. What good?